started and then I went back. Okay, so game theory models strategic interaction. So models strategic interaction among agents. Now, agents is kind of our generic word. A lot of times, for example, we might be talking about businesses or firms. We could be talking about a government or a government agency, like the Federal Reserve or the FDIC or something like that. We could be talking about a person. We could be talking about a nonprofit firm or some other organization. In other words, it's completely general on the type of thing we could be modeling, so we're just going to call them some sort of economic agent. So model strategic interaction among agents by analyzing moves and counter moves. Moves and counter moves based on expected payoffs. Based on expected payoffs. Where the payoffs could be a variety of things too. What do firms try to maximize? Profit. What do, what's the government trying to maximize? Maybe tax revenue or something, right? What's a person trying to maximize? Income. Utility. Good. So again, the window's wide open here of analyzing why they're doing something based on what their objective is. What are they trying to maximize? What is their type of payoff? So it allows a lot of flexibility that way to investigate various types of behavior. So let's just jump right into an example. Suppose we have two firms. Suppose we have two firms, Coke and Pepsi. Two firms, Coke and Pepsi, and each is deciding on whether to do a high or low advertising budget. So we've got two firms, Coke and Pepsi, and each firm is trying to decide whether to go with a high or a low advertising budget. All right, so here's the details of our case. We're going to have a 4-square box. Looks like this. So draw it kind of nice and big for starters. And let's go ahead and put Coke here. And Coke is going to have the decision of going with a high budget or a low budget. And Pepsi is up here, and they are going to decide whether they want to go with a high or a low advertising budget. All right, so if both companies choose a high to spend a lot of money on advertising, a high advertising budget, then each will get $20 million of profit. So 20 for Coke, 20 for Pepsi. And if both companies cheap out and go with the low advertising budget, then they're going to make more money. Each firm is going to make $50 million of profit. If Coke goes with a high budget and Pepsi goes low, Coke is going to make a lot of money and Pepsi is going to make nothing that year. So Coke gets $100 million worth of profit, Pepsi gets 0. Likewise, if Pepsi goes all out on the advertising budget and Coke cheaps out, Coke's going to get 0, and Pepsi is going to get $100 million. All right. So, what would you do? Where is this? What's going to be our outcome? What sort of equilibrium might we expect if this was the setup? What would you do? What's that?
I think they're going to both go high.
High? High? Why do you say that?
They're going to assume the other one will go high.
And why are they doing that?
Or else they won't get
Isn't low better?
Well, yes,
But they don't know that.
but
Yeah, they can't trust the other firm to do low.
Agreed.
Okay.
They're gonna go with the
Wouldn't you
high
rather
because the
have
other firm is
20,000?
gonna get 0 from their point of view.
All right. So if they shoot for high, they might be able to give the other firm 0.
Well, wouldn't you rather have 20,000 than nothing? Like,
20 versus nothing. But what about the 50? The 50 makes them both. Wouldn't there, don't you guys agree that 50 for both is better than 20 for both?
well, yeah.
but you can't.
Austin?
You can't.
Going high, make sure they have profit.
Okay. So if they go high, they make sure they've
It's
got
the safest
something.
option.
If they go low, they cannot have.
Yeah, it's the safest option.
Boy, you can see how this little simple little thing here all of a sudden generates lots of discussion, doesn't it? If we start thinking about how this might shake out. All right. So, why can't we get here? How could we get here? Is this a possibility or not? It seems like a lot of you are suggesting high, even though 50 seems better.
If you're in a situation where companies trust each other
Okay.
and like have like some kind of contract written, I suppose you could reach there, but I doubt you ever really could.
Okay. So what you see from the video, it sounds like I'm kind of sensing that the video, this is one of the first times I've played that video before hitting the material, and I haven't always played it in the past, so I'm kind of sensing that it had a good impact, because I hear you guys using that trust word, and you saw that something good came out of not trusting the others, right? Or that we could have a stable situation, so that's good. And then you're bringing up ways with contracts and trust. So is cooperation allowed under this setting in the United States if we're really talking about Coke and Pepsi?
Not since
No.
Roosevelt
It
was
is
there.
Price setting.
So it's price setting, right? So that was one of those things that we'll learn more about in this chapter that I think we've mentioned before, is that in order to keep competition alive, the United States passed laws that says you can't work together. Sorry, you can't collude and set prices or make joint decisions on stuff. So maybe they could draw up a contract, maybe they couldn't, but we're raising one of the first important points of analyzing a game. And the question is, are they allowed to cooperate or not? So is this a cooperative or non-cooperative game? That's an important part. Are the agents even allowed to cooperate? If they are, then that might take us down one line of reasoning, and if not, that might change things. All right. So, what if we played this 100 times, would that change your answer? So instead of playing it once, we have companies here that are going to play this game 100 times. Maybe it's 100 months in a row or whatever. Maybe it's 100 years, but that, if we're talking about companies, but months might be a little bit more reasonable. So does that change your answer at all on how you'd play each time period if we were going to play 100 times? How does that change the complexion of this?
If you're talking about Coke and Pepsi, it can start to get really complicated because you get into like times like February or March when there's like the Super Bowl. So
Okay.
their budgets are going to be a lot bigger then.
Okay, so I want to bring you back to the economic model. Reality is awesome, but reality is so doggone complex that you can't really draw conclusions without making assumptions. So what we do in principles class is make some huge assumptions about life, right? I mean, some of the stuff we've done so far is kind of absurd. But hopefully we gain some insights into behavior, and then eventually we can start to make it more complex to match reality by relaxing some of those assumptions. So try to avoid telling those sorts of stories that are very real, but not applicable to this economic model. So here's the model. This is the information you got. We're going to play it 100 times. How do you play it on time number 1? How do you play it on time number 2? How do you play it on time number 56? How do you play it on time number 100? Okay? We're going to play it 100 times. This is what you get. None of this stuff changes over time. It's this thing every time for 100 times. What do you think? What might you be tempted to do if you were a profit maximizer? Yes?
I think they might be willing to take the risk of going low for one after so many times.
Okay, yeah. Looks like it'd be kind of tempting to kind of test the waters a little bit, right? Because, gosh, we got 100 more times to play. And maybe we just kind of experiment, like, hey, I'll signal to you, I'm willing to play if you're willing to play, right? We're both looking at the same board. Let's try to do something. So let's kind of play that out to its logical end. And let's say we tiptoe in the water and we think, oh, that might be a good strategy for us. What might you be tempted to do on the 100th time?
Go high.
Go high, right? So all of a sudden Coke's saying, you know, I got an idea. I'm going to go high on the 100th time. You know, we can play this little footsie game for a while and then on the 100th time. But of course, then Pepsi is thinking to itself, you know what? Now that I'm getting to think about it and I think of the cooperation thing, I bet Coke's going to screw me on the 100th time. I got an idea. What should Pepsi do? Screw Coke on
The 99.
the 99th try. You got it. Now Coke's sitting there thinking, well, wait a second, if I'm thinking that, they're probably thinking that, and so he's probably going to do it on the 99th. I'm going to do it on the 98th. Well, I bet he's thinking that. I'm thinking that. He's going to be thinking that. And so what happens here is we start going 97, 96, 95, and the whole thing unravels all the way down to
1.
yeah, the same thing that we came to before. All right, so that's another issue here that can change some games. So is the game repeated? Is the game repeated? That could play an impact on the strategy. I just ran through that strategy that it might unravel itself. What if we made it played an indefinite number of times? We don't know when the end is. So rather than 100 times, we're just going to play it indefinitely with no ending time set. Does that change your willingness to maybe play footsie a little bit? Yeah, it does, right? Just that fact alone all of a sudden changes the strategy. If you're playing forever, possibly, then you've got a lot of time to recoup that, and all of a sudden it took away that advantage of on the last time I'm going to screw you over if we don't know what that last time is. So, is the game repeated? And then kind of a sub-bullet to that, is it a finite game? So is it finite, which you can put in parentheses a certain number of times, or is it an infinite game? In other words, no end is set. It's got an infinite time horizon, potentially. No end is set. All right. Now, if we are doing it just one time, so if the answer to that is no, we call it a one-shot game. So my next bullet here would just be, if played just once, it is called a one-shot game.
The technical term.
Yeah, one-shot game. All right. Another one to throw at you. If it is a repeated game, does it make a difference if we play it sequentially? So you guys play board games like that, right? So you go first, then I see what you did, and then I go. And then you go. And then I go. And then you go. And then I go. So if we added a sequential part to this game, would that matter?
Yes.
It could, right? So now all of a sudden you're seeing what they chose rather than not seeing it. And so there's a distinction made between a simultaneous game where you're making the choice at the same time, kind of like playing rock, paper, scissors, right? You're going at the same time, but really, you don't. The only part that's important of the simultaneous game is that you don't know what the other chose at the time you did it. The fact that I'm choosing today and you're choosing tomorrow is still a simultaneous game as long as you don't know what I picked, right? So we've got this idea of whether it's a simultaneous or sequential game. Simultaneous or sequential game. A simultaneous game is one in which each player makes their choice without knowledge of the other's choice. And a sequential game is one in which we take turns. Each agent alternates choice and knows others prior to making theirs. So we just take turns. All right. So all of that from this little guy here. So let's make this a non-cooperative, one-shot, simultaneous game. One-shot, simultaneous, non-cooperative game. Where are we going to end up?
High.
High.
All the time.
All right, so I'm guessing not everybody's seeing high. If you're not, you're okay, by the way. In fact, the people who are seeing high might be kind of weirdos, I'm not sure. So what we want to think about is why that might be a good thing to do. And I think Austin was kind of onto something when you talked about having a better payoff no matter what, that kind of concept. One way to go about trying to solve games is to look for what's called a dominant strategy. So that can help you solve a game. It's kind of the first step I'd recommend you guys to do when you got a game in front of you. So, a dominant strategy. A dominant strategy is a choice that leaves an agent better off no matter what the other chooses. So let's go back and hammer out a few more details on this thing. This little box here, the way we laid this out, this whole thing is called the payoff matrix. The payoff matrix. These guys over here, whoever's listed here, are the agents. In this case, we're doing Coke and Pepsi. Each of these agents are choosing a strategy or a choice combination. So you can think of these as the choice or strategy. And then finally, inside each cell of the matrix is the payoffs. And the first payoff is always the player, the agent listed to the left. So this is agent over here, agent Coke payoff. And this to the right is agent Pepsi here. This is Pepsi's payoff. As we start to do this, you're going to have to kind of train your eyeballs a little bit on which one goes with which, right? Because if Coke or if Pepsi chooses high, then you're always kind of focusing in on what their payoff is because they care about themselves, kind of the self-interested behavior here under this. 20 and 100 are the relevant payoffs, but their payoffs are dependent upon what Coke chooses. If they go higher, they go low. So back to the dominant strategy now. Does either player have a dominant strategy, a choice that makes them better off no matter what the other one does?
Yep.
Yes. Which one? Who's got it?
It's high.
Who is it though? Coke or Pepsi? Coke? Both? Yeah. All right, let's do a little test here. This is how you do it on a test. Hint, hint. This is how you can kind of write this out. So, dominant strategy. So, checking for Coke. Checking for Coke. What you want to do is say to yourself, I'm your Coke, if you got your Coca-Cola hat on, if Pepsi chooses high, then Coke should choose high. So Pepsi chooses high. What would be the best for Coke to do? 20 is greater than 0. Coke should choose high. If Pepsi chooses low, Coke would be best off by choosing high. So if Pepsi chooses low, we can kind of ignore this data. 100 is greater than 50, so Coke would be better off choosing high. So what we've determined then is no matter what Pepsi does, Coke is better off choosing high. Therefore, Coke has a dominant strategy of high. So to check for the other company, the other agent, for Pepsi, if Coke chooses high, then Pepsi should choose. You gotta be careful. Now this is where your eyeball needs to be trained. You can, I'll go through some training exercises later, but so if Coke chooses high, you can kind of ignore this one. What would Pepsi be best off doing? high because their payoff is always the second entry. 20 is greater than 0, so they should choose high. And if Coke chooses low, Pepsi should choose high again. So if Coke chooses low, then what would Pepsi be best off doing? Again, their entry is always the second. 100 is greater than 50, so they should choose high. Therefore, Pepsi has a dominant strategy of high. Which then brings us to our result that high, high, both going high, both getting high, ends up being the result we come to expect. All right, so the last concept I want to look at comes to us from John Nash. And he was very interested. If you watch the movie, it's a great movie, by the way. It's not even econ related. It's just a good flick. But now you might even get more out of it. Do you guys remember the scene in the bar where he's trying to figure out how to get a hot date?
What's the most efficient way for the group to get laid?
Yep, you got it. So that was their story that they told. What's the best chance to get the girl? And so they play a game theory, and John Nash, I don't know how much this is based on the true story or not, but he kind of runs out of the bar. He's like, aha, I got it. And that's what we're going to do now, is kind of his I got it moment here, was what's now called the Nash Equilibrium. A Nash Equilibrium. So, a Nash Equilibrium is a choice set. In other words, a set of choices. A choice set such that neither agent wishes to change their choice taking as given the other's choice. Now this is slightly different than dominant strategy, so kind of hang on those words. It's a choice set, so it's one of our answers, such that neither one wants to change. So coming back to this equilibrium, we can ask ourselves, for Pepsi, would Pepsi like to change if they could?
Yeah.
Would Pepsi like to change their answer, taking as given that Coke's going to be choosing high? No. So Pepsi doesn't want to switch because 20 is greater than 0. Would Coke like to switch, taking as given that Pepsi's going to go high? No, because 20 is greater than 0. So this is a Nash equilibrium. So we put a little N in the upper right-hand corner to denote that it's a Nash equilibrium. Let's take that logic a little bit differently. Let's take the preferred payoff here of 50. Nash would say, is this a stable outcome? Is this a stable equilibrium outcome? And then you just have to say, well, would Coke like to change their answer if they could?
Yeah.
Yes, because taking as given that Pepsi's going low, Coke would rather have 100 over a 50. So as soon as they'd like to change their answer, then we know that it's not a Nash equilibrium. And so that's how we test for Nash equilibriums. All right, so let me put that little last comment here. Kind of a key point. You can test any outcome, in other words, the payoff combos, the payoff combo in the matrix. You can test any outcome by seeing if one wants to change. If they do, then it's not a Nash equilibrium. All right, we will pick up there Friday.